This is Vietnam, a small country on the other side of the world. And if you were to ask Americans in 1960 to find Vietnam on a map, good chance that most of them would not be able to. So why do we care about a small Asian country on the other side of the world? Well, because we care about communism. For the last 3 units, we've talked about American foreign policy. We called it containment. We called it the Truman Doctrine. We referred to the domino theory. All involve stopping the spread of communism. So why do we get involved in the Vietnam War? Because we want to stop the spread of communism. Kind of from the start, our involvement in Vietnam just kind of feels dirty. We support South Vietnam. We support leaders who are corrupt, who oppress Buddhist monks. They're kind of bad people, to the point where we actually gave the head nod to an assassination on Diem. Right from the start, our involvement with Vietnam is a lot of secrets and a lot of under-the-table dealings. We're supplying tons of money to the French to stop communist influence in Vietnam. It doesn't work. So we send tons of military officials and generals to train the South Vietnamese to fight communism. It doesn't work. And then we lie and exaggerate about an incident in the Tonkin Gulf, which gives us the justification to finally send ground troops into Vietnam. Right from the start, President Johnson says that we're going to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. But our strategy does not do that. One of the first things we tried is what we call the Strategic Hamlet Program, where we took all the people in South Vietnam and we put them in these little villages. When you look at these villages, they kind of look like prisons. And for the South Vietnamese people, it felt like prisons. Our idea is that we were going to babysit these people so that they did not infiltrate to be Viet Cong guerrilla warfare fighters. It did not work. Another thing we attempted to do is bomb the country into oblivion using napalm. We dropped thousands, millions of gallons of napalm on Vietnam, completely destroyed their jungle landscape. Once again, that did not win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. From the start, Ho Chi Minh, who is the leader of North Vietnam, he said this, and he actually said this pertaining to the French. But he said, you will kill 10 of our guys for every one French soldier that we kill, and we'll still win. Well, when you look at the statistics, 1.5 million people in North Vietnam died during the Vietnam War. 60,000 American soldiers died. That's a ratio a lot more than 10 to 1. But who won the Vietnam War? The North Vietnamese, because it meant more to them. Famous quote that came from a documentary I watched called The Fogs of War, where they interviewed kind of the architect of the war for the United States, a guy by the name of Robert Strange, yes, his middle name was Strange, McNamara. And the North Vietnamese told him, you had it all wrong from the start. You were fighting a war against communism. We were fighting a war for independence. And our independence, which they had been fighting for years. They were fighting for independence from the French, and then the Japanese, and then the French again, and now the Americans, meant so much more to them that they were willing to pay the price for the war. And in the United States, as the years progressed, we were not. So when we look at the end of the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon oversees the end of the Vietnam War. The war had got so unpopular as we moved into the 1970s that we weren't thinking about winning the war anymore. We're thinking about getting out and saving face. Richard Nixon's program was called Vietnamization, and that's kind of what the idea is. How do we get out of this mess? Well, we finally reached a ceasefire in January of 1973, which gave us the opportunity to leave. And as we were leaving Vietnam in January of 1973, we promised the South Vietnamese, we promised our allies that if the North Vietnamese attack you, we'll come back. Well, they did attack. They attacked in 1975. Did we come back and honor our promise to go defend them? We did not. We allowed the country to fall and be unified under communism, because by 1975, no matter who the president of the United States was, it was very evident and obvious that the American people did not want anything to do with Vietnam. So was this peace with honor, or did we win or lose the Vietnam War? Well, you can still debate that. What is definitely said is we went into Vietnam to stop the spread of communism. It was based on the idea of the domino theory. But what happens at the end of the Vietnam War? Well, Vietnam is unified under communism, and much like the domino theory said, that if one country falls to communism, the others will topple like dominoes, or with Laos and Cambodia, that's exactly what happened. So, I would argue that this was a military loss for the United States and a big win for communism, but more importantly, a victory for the North Vietnamese and for Vietnam independence.